This episode contains references to suicide. At the conclusion of a visit to a medical office for a routine flu vaccination, the doctor, unrolling my sleeve back down and sliding his chair away, casually asked if there was anything else he could help me with. I was motioning to stand and leave with every intention of smiling politely and offering a no thank you, when I instead suddenly uttered, "I'm thinking of committing suicide." A silence hung in the space between us, the doctor being as shocked as I was. I had no idea of where those words had come from. Life was good, and I had everything to live for. "I'm thinking of jumping," then spat out of my mouth. The doctor immediately got into gear and picked up the phone to tell the receptionist to reschedule his next patients, and I was left apologetically trying to tell the doctor that there was no need, as I had no idea why I'd said what I'd said. He was intent on calling a crash team and organising my immediate admission into hospital, and it took me at least 30 minutes to de-escalate the situation and convince the man that I did not pose a danger to myself. At the time, I was staying away from home, and I had never met this doctor before, so I understood his concerns. "Still," he said, struggling with the medical legalities, "it's an odd thing for you to just say out of the blue, Daniel. That alone should be investigated." And before he allowed me to leave, he made me promise that I would honour the referral to a psychiatrist that he himself would organise. I left the office and sat down on a bench at a bus stop a little further down the road. I was shell-shocked at what had just happened. I'd been through a lot over recent years. My marriage had broken down. I'd survived a life-threatening aneurysm with a stark warning from surgeons about the long-term prognosis. My entire life had undergone massive shifts, and not only did I hear voices, those episodes of unconscious writing had only heightened. So, the doctor's pleas for me to investigate why I'd just uttered those words did make sense. Perhaps my subconscious was troubled without me knowing, though I was not looking forward to telling a psychiatrist, "Doctor, I hear voices." I did go along, and the psychiatrist's findings did prove interesting. On examination, I find no evidence of suicidal ideation. Daniel is not thinking about committing suicide. Rather, his thought processes are engaged in thinking about committing suicide, i.e., thinking about the subject of committing suicide, which is not suicidal ideation, and so is not of concern. Daniel presents in a good state of mental health, and his examination was only noteworthy in that he did not display any of the usual indicators pointing towards personality disorder that even most individuals of good mental health can at times display. As for the voices that he reports hearing, I can only suggest that he seeks out some type of spiritual counselling. That final comment was not what I was expecting from a psychiatrist. If only that had been the end of the episode. A couple of weeks later, I was busy doing some work in my room at my accommodation when a man's voice in my head suddenly shouted, "Now, now, now!" I have a memory, a frame-by-frame slow-motion memory of reacting as soon as I'd heard the first "now." I was getting to my feet to head for the door before the second "now" had even been spoken. Without a thought, I opened the door to sprint along the corridor. Up ahead, I could see someone stood with head bowed and hands held together in prayer, and as I closed in, they stretched out their arms horizontally either side to form the figure of a cross and bodily leant forward to fall into the stairwell. They were already at an angle of around 30 degrees when I managed to catch their still outstretched arm and pull them back to safety. Now I understood. Someone in my vicinity had been thinking of suicide and thinking of jumping. I had been subconsciously pre-warned, so when that voice asked me to act with urgency, I did so without thought or hesitation. Full resolution came, though, when the suicidal person's doctor was called in. It was the same doctor that I had seen for the flu vaccination. I made myself scarce, at the risk of the man recognizing me. So, the line between pathological delusion and intuitive perception is clear. Often in life, we can think that we are looking at the figure of a circle. But if we zoom in and look closer and closer, we will see a small gap in the circumference, and we will realize that it isn't a circle after all. It is, in fact, a single straight line that has been curved around until both ends of the line appear to almost touch. And if we were to just straighten the line, we'd see that both ends, which had seemed so close, are actually poles apart with, in this case, pathological delusion at one end and intuitive perception at the far polar opposite end. No fine line between the two exists. The space-time continuum is the framework in which consciousness constructs our perceived reality, so it should be no surprise that we can be guided through consciousness to a location in space with precise timing in time while responding to some need. The opening excerpt of this episode, taken from my book, Matter of Time, is a fictionalized version of actual events that I myself experienced. I had no idea of what possessed me to hike obliviously in the dead of night to end up at that motorway overpass. The following day, another victim of a serial killer was found. It would be some time before I was to make the connection that the killer had driven along the motorway that night and across the roundabout overpass to which I'd been drawn, as the killer hunted his next victim.
You've been listening to Stranger Than Fiction with Daniel Caine. Join us in the next episode as we continue to investigate why the reality we perceive truly is stranger than fiction. For more information, visit www.danielcaine.com.